Let's dive into 5 unanswered questions surrounding 9/11 that remain points of debate among researchers, investigators, and the public. Together, these cases do not necessarily rewrite history, but they remind us that the full story of 9/11 is more complex than the official timeline suggests. So as we look into the mystery behind why some of the terrorists drove from Boston to Portland, as well as one of the terrorists having a mistaken identity, let's send our thoughts and prayers to those affected by 9/11, both on the day itself and in the aftermath, right up until the present day. The Pentagon's missing money. On September 10th, 2001, one day before 9/11, US Secretary of Defense Donald Rumsfeld gave a speech that would become infamous in light of what followed the next day. He acknowledged that the Pentagon could not properly account for $2.3 trillion in transactions, describing the Department of Defense's financial systems as so archaic and fragmented that it was a matter of life and death to fix them. Here's his speech.
The technology revolution has transformed organizations across the private sector. But not ours, not fully, not yet. We are, as they say, tangled in our anchor chain. Our financial systems are decades old. According to some estimates, we cannot track $2.3 trillion in transactions.
The coincidence of this revelation with the 9/11 attacks has fueled speculation for more than 2 decades, particularly because the section of the Pentagon struck by American Airlines Flight 77 included offices of the Army's Financial Management Division, where staff were working on precisely such accounting issues. The missing money was not missing in the sense of theft, but rather reflecting the Pentagon's inability to reconcile transactions across dozens of outdated, incompatible computer systems. The Government Accountability Office had criticized these failures for years, noting that the DoD had never passed a clear audit. Still, the sheer scale of $2.3 trillion, larger than the entire federal budget at the time, made the problem dramatic. When many of the people investigating those discrepancies were killed on 9/11, suspicion deepened that the attack might have destroyed evidence of deeper financial irregularities. Skeptics argue that the timing is too coincidental to dismiss. The very day after Rumsfeld's admission, the office most directly connected to the Pentagon accounting issues was obliterated, with records and staff lost. For some, this looks less like chance and more like deliberate targeting. Others go further, suggesting that evidence of corruption or fraud was eliminated in the chaos. Official investigations have consistently downplayed such interpretations. Later audits and Inspector General reports emphasize that the $2.3 trillion figure referred to transactions that were poorly tracked, not money that had vanished. Much of it could eventually be reconciled, though the DoD's financial systems remained deeply flawed well into the 2020s. The inability to account for spending was systematic, not a unique scandal suddenly exposed on the eve of 9/11. Their enduring mystery, then, is less about a hidden conspiracy than about perception. The juxtaposition of Rumsfeld's speech and the destruction of Pentagon accounting offices created the appearance of a cover-up. In reality, it was more than likely chronic mismanagement and the coincidence of timing, scale, and tragic loss of life that gave rise to one of the most enduring questions of 9/11. So was it simply bad luck, or something more deliberate? What do you think? Why did Mohamed Atta and Abdulaziz al-Omari drive from Boston to Portland? One of the enduring puzzles in the 9/11 timeline is why Mohamed Atta, the operational leader of the hijackers, and fellow hijacker Abdulaziz al-Omari, chose to make an apparently unnecessary detour to Portland, Maine on the morning of the attacks. At first glance, the decision seems counterintuitive. It risked delays, added logistical complexity, and could have jeopardized their ability to board the key flight in Boston. Yet despite investigations, the precise rationale has never been conclusively established. The basic facts are clear. On September 10, 2001, Atta and al-Omari drove from Boston to Portland, staying overnight at a Comfort Inn. The following morning they boarded a commuter flight from Portland to Boston Logan International Airport, arriving in time to connect with American Airlines Flight 11, the first plane hijacked. Their checked bags, containing a mix of clothing, a will, and training materials, were delayed in Boston and did not make it onto Flight 11, later becoming crucial evidence for investigators. But why make this risky journey? One explanation is practicality. Portland was a quieter airport with less stringent security, making it easier to pass screening. By originating there, the two men may have hoped to avoid heightened scrutiny that could come with checking in directly at Logan. Still, this reasoning raises the question of why only Atta and al-Omari chose this route, while the other hijackers boarded directly in Boston. Another theory suggests a psychological or symbolic motive. Some argue that Atta may have wanted to spend his final night in a more isolated, reflective environment, away from the intensity of Boston. Portland's quieter setting might have provided space for prayer, contemplation, or simply a less stressful departure point before embarking on the operation. Skeptics, however, view the detour as suspicious. Had their commuter flight been delayed or cancelled, Atta, the tactical coordinator, could have missed the mission entirely. The fact that his luggage failed to transfer in time has even led some to suggest that the Portland trip was intentional, leaving behind evidence that cemented the official narrative of his role. Others dismiss this as a coincidence, the kind of mishap easily explained by the chaos of airline baggage systems. Ultimately, the Portland trip remains one of the smallest yet strangest mysteries of 9/11. It highlights the tension between meticulous planning and seemingly reckless risks in the hijackers' behavior. Whether driven by a desire to avoid scrutiny, personal motives, or simply chance, Atta and al-Omari's decision continues to invite speculation, reminding us of how many details of that day still remain unsettled. Ziad Jarrah's mistaken identity claim. One of the lesser-known mysteries surrounding the 9/11 hijackers involves Ziad Jarrah, the Lebanese national who is alleged to have piloted United Airlines Flight 93 during its final moments. Jarrah's case has long been complicated by claims of mistaken identity, rooted in conflicting reports about his background, movements, and even his personality. These discrepancies have fueled suspicion that either the wrong man was accused, or that Jarrah lived a kind of double life in the years leading up to the attacks. Jarrah was born in 1975 in Lebanon and came from a relatively well-off family. By most accounts, he was sociable, secular in outlook, and even had a long-term girlfriend in Germany. Friends and relatives later described him as someone who enjoyed Western nightlife and did not display the hallmarks of a committed extremist. This characterization sits uneasily along the narrative of a man who allegedly trained in Afghanistan, pledged allegiance to al-Qaeda, and eventually chose martyrdom on 9/11. The contrast has led some to suggest that there may have been confusion over whether he was indeed the same Ziad Jarrah identified by intelligence agencies. Fueling this were early press reports following the attacks that cited family members in Lebanon denying he could have been involved. Some relatives insisted Jarrah's passport had been stolen while he was abroad, and that he may have been impersonated. A few went so far to claim that he had actually been the victim of identity theft, pointing out that multiple people with similar names were living or studying in Germany at the same time. At least one cousin stated that the FBI had confused him with another man. These doubts were compounded by inconsistencies in travel records. Jarrah reportedly flew frequently between Germany, Lebanon, and the United States in the years before 2001, sometimes on tight timelines that critics have argued do not match easily with the known logistics of terrorist training. His girlfriend in Germany also testified that he seemed conflicted in the months before 9/11, even planning trips home, which struck her as at odds with the mindset of a committed suicide hijacker. Nevertheless, the official account holds that there was no mistaken identity. Jarrah's name appeared on Flight 93's manifest. His visa and training records tied him directly to al-Qaeda operatives, and his DNA was reportedly recovered from the crash site. Yet the family's protestations and the unusual contradictions in his profile continue to raise questions. The mistaken identity claim underscores the broader theme of ambiguity and unanswered doubts with the 9/11 story. How much do we truly know about the men blamed for carrying out the attacks, and were the lines between their personal and militant identities more complex than the official report allows. Who was the black tag lady, and did she actually exist? One of the most eerie stories that's always stuck with me is an account from emergency medical specialist Ernest Armstead. The mystery is twofold. Did Ernest actually witness the black tag lady, or did his brain concoct this story as a result of the extreme stress he experienced that day? And if she was indeed real, who was she? Now I think it's best to hear Ernest telling the story in his own words.
Green tag for minor injuries, you can understand everything. Then you have the red tag for immediate. And then when we get to the deceased, that means no care needed. At this time, this person is presumed dead. I was underneath the towers, going from area to area. I did not see any living person on the ground. Everybody was deceased. So going past, you just rip the tags off and left deceased, until I ran into that one person. I put deceased, which is a black tag. And she says, I'm not dead. Call my daughter. But she didn't know what I knew, and she didn't see what I see. Her head did not hit the ground, or I couldn't see that the head was, because the hair was still intact. She looked like an office personnel. She looked like maybe a woman that was on the plane. And her makeup. But what I saw below the torso was complete crushed, disfigured. This lady must have came down feet first. You can't take, stop, I'm not dead. She would not survive another couple of minutes. So I lied. I said, you okay? This is preliminary, this is just, I meant to react, I tore the wrong thing off. Relax, they're coming. Don't worry about what I just did. I had a good conscience about what I was saying, and that I was lying, but I wasn't lying in the fact of her condition. I was lying in the fact that I did think she was dead.
This story has haunted me ever since I first heard of it. Some say the black tag lady did not even exist, or was dead and completely unresponsive, and her telling Ernest she was alive was his mind playing tricks on him due to severe trauma. The fact that Ernest said in that interview that she may have been on one of the planes has led people to think that he fabricated the story, as this would be completely impossible. However, given everything Ernest experienced that day, he is going to have lapses in judgment and memory. In my opinion, he wasn't lying. If she was indeed real, which we have no reason not to believe, then her lucidity is deeply unsettling. She seemed to understand exactly what the black tag meant, meaning that she may have had some medical knowledge herself. It's unsure how she ended up in her state either. Did she fall or jump from the World Trade Center and somehow survive? Or was she a bystander crushed by debris whilst walking in the plaza? Despite Ernest's description of her, the black tag lady has never been identified. I don't know about you, but this one deeply unsettles me. Did the pilots and crew really get spared on American Airlines Flight 77? It's long been thought that the 9/11 terrorists killed all the flight crews on board the hijacked planes. Flight 11 pilots John Ogonowski and Thomas McGinnis Jr. were killed in the cockpit. Flight 175 pilots Victor Sarancini and Michael Horrocks were murdered before the impact. It's unsure exactly what happened to Flight 93 pilots Captain Jason Dahl and First Officer Leroy Homer Jr., but it's highly speculated that they were attacked and murdered. However, Flight 77 was odd and has been open to speculation about what happened to the pilots during the takeover. Firstly, the theory behind them not immediately being killed comes from a call from passenger Barbara Olson, who was on the flight. She made a call to her husband where she stated that the pilot was in the back of the plane with the passengers, before asking what she should tell him to do. She also did not report that anyone had been stabbed or killed on the plane, or that there was a bomb threat, unlike some of the other calls from other flights that morning, which suggested all of those things. On Flight 175, Robert Fangman told the United Airlines dispatcher that both pilots were dead. Another passenger reported that someone at the front of the plane had been murdered. Flight 93's CVR picked up sounds of gurgling in the cockpit, suggesting that the pilots were mortally wounded during the hijacking, and Flight 11 calls reported severe stabbings. However, nothing of the sort came from Flight 77. So if they didn't immediately kill the pilots on entering the cockpit on Flight 77, the question is why? There is one theory. Hani Hanjour, the pilot hijacker for Flight 77, had spent a large amount of his time during the 90s in Arizona at flight school. It's believed that he had a lot of respect for pilots and had aspirations to be an airline pilot, but that never came to fruition. Some have speculated that he couldn't bring himself to stab them to death like the other hijackers had agreed to do so. But how could you have sympathy for someone while simultaneously committing an act that would kill them anyway, moments later? Unfortunately, we're probably never going to know exactly what happened on that flight. Another theory is that Charles Burlingham III, who was the pilot on Flight 77, was a Navy-rated pilot, and he peacefully handed over the controls in order to comply with the terrorists, not realizing that they were going to crash the plane, and instead thinking it was a monetary ransom. In a second call, Barbara actually told her husband that one of the hijackers had announced that it was a hijacking, and that they were going to land and start negotiations. So perhaps they also told the pilots this and they complied. It sounds insane to think that they would have handed over the controls, but people don't realize that before 9/11, the protocol was not necessarily to fully resist a hijacking, as crashing a plane into a building was unheard of. Still, many believe it's extremely unlikely that they would have given the terrorists the controls and fully cooperated. So if that is out of the question, then what exactly happened, and who was the pilot at the back of the plane that Barbara described? Is it possible that the pilots did actually get ushered to the back of the plane, or was this some kind of miscommunication or lost in translation message from Barbara? Unfortunately, I don't think we'll ever find out. An interesting fact about Captain Charles Burlingham III is that he was actually a contestant on the game show Greed in 2000, just 1 year before the September 11th attacks. We'll leave you with this footage of him.
Nice to see you. Now, you said you had 50 Secret Service agents on a flight of yours. You were obviously the pilot. What were these guys doing?
Well, I fly out of Washington, D.C. a lot, and we're notified when we get officials like that on the airplane, and these were an advance team for the president heading down to Dallas-Fort Worth.
Oh, I see. Make you a little nervous?
Actually, I felt pretty secure with them on board.
Oh, I guess so. Okay.
Thanks for watching. This video brings an end to our 9/11 focused videos for the month of September. Our heart goes out to all of those affected by 9/11. Stay safe, and I'll see you next time.